UNDP several years ago did a very large study of those who were recruited into violent extremist movements and found that those factors plus a general source of grievance with regards to government, lack of confidence the government would respond, that government would only be looking for the interest of a few. Apparently about 78% had very low levels of trust in police and politicians and the military. Notably, 71% pointed to the killing or the arrest of a friend or a family member as being the tipping point reason why they joined a movement. And I think that that suggests the need to perhaps rethink strategies that are focused primarily on strengthening state security forces to suppress violent extremism, to looking at some of these other underlying drivers and looking at justice and human rights protection as being perhaps one of the things that could be preventive, to go back to Amir Abdullah's point of view. So I'd like to conclude with three implications of taking a systems thinking approach to looking at conflict and development in Africa. And to say that, first of all, if we're looking at systems, we need to carefully explore how change in one factor will ripple throughout the system. We can't think of policy interventions just on their own. So if we look at, for example, all the big infrastructure projects of the 60s and 70s, and how much this actually, they tended to enable state capture rather than promoting equitable development. We need to carefully look at how action in one area is going to affect elsewhere. Second, we need to look and find leverage to figure out those places where specific interventions can help to really have important strategic effects elsewhere. I think that there's three areas in particular where leverage may be greatest. One is this need to really strengthen natural resource governance and land reform at that structural level as being the areas where you can really work to address the patterns of economic exclusion and give a sense of hopefulness in the future. Along with that, we know that Africa is the youngest continent in the world, and that with the very large youth population, there's a tremendous risk of recruitment into violent groups unless there are jobs and economic opportunities. Really focusing on jobs for youth seems to be a key one to find. Thirdly, is this aspect of justice and security sector reform. As I mentioned earlier, it's that feeling of justice denied and it triggering kind of the trauma responses from previous episodes of violence and exclusion can be quite key. Third implication is, once again, when looking at systems, often trying to understand what are the rules that are underlying the logic of that system. And I think that when we're talking about a system logic that may have been based on exclusion, that the notion that the state exists to protect the interests status of the groups who are already dominant, that logic has to change. And I think that one of the things that can help to enable that is by having all of these strategies and policy approaches be approached through a dialogic engagement of having those who have been systemically excluded being key at the table, not having actions done to them, but to be the key people and saying, what are the needs, how can they be satisfied, and to have that done in a dialogic way. Africa has a wonderful, rich, inspiring tradition of national dialogue, whether the national conferences in La Francophonie countries or whether South Africa's national dialogue process, really kind of having that spirit, that willingness to engage in relationship building as being one of the ways of moving forward, both in terms of deciding how to address things at a local level, in the sub-regional levels, sectoral reforms, or indeed in the national political sphere. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and wrap up my remarks.